Hello, everybody, and welcome to this interview with Dr. Murray Height. Murray is one of the co-founders of HeiQ and has been here since the beginning in 2005. So I let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So as Rahel mentioned, I'm co-founder of HeiQ, and my title is Chief Science Officer. And that role basically involves overseeing a lot of the innovation activities at HeiQ, with a particular focus on the research side of innovation is where I spend most of my time. I'm located in Australia at the HeiQ Australia business unit. So I'm over on the other side of the world from a lot of you all.
Okay, well, let's jump right into this interview. Like the first question is, the topic of this interview is innovation. So where do you get, your ideas for innovations from?
Yeah, I think the thing about innovation is that it generally comes about through a lot of interactions. And so inspiration can come in many different forms. So one of the areas where we find that a lot of innovation at HeiQ is inspired from comes from really interacting with customers and finding out more about their needs and some of the things that they would like to do. So it's really part of an ongoing dialogue that starts to seed ideas, and from there it becomes ideas that we can look into and eventually bring through as innovations. So that's one area of inspiration. The other is really in the scientific world, and comes also from interacting with researchers who are looking at new materials and trying to push the frontiers of knowledge. And those types of conversations also are quite inspiring in terms of pushing boundaries of what's possible. And I guess the other area to mention is really nature, and looking at ways that nature can help us to find better ways to design better materials and achieve things that are quite complex. So trying to learn from fish that swim extremely fast in water, or creatures that keep cool in extreme temperatures. So there's lots of inspiration that we also draw on from nature.
Okay, well, all of these inspirations, they turn into innovations, but I guess you'll need partners also to work together on all these things. So who are you cooperating with to bring innovations to the market in the end?
Yeah, in terms of bringing innovations through the market, there's really two main categories of partnerships that we pursue, if you like. So one of those is working a lot with brands. So for example, brands like Patagonia, we've worked with on a number of innovations, for example, in freshness and also water repellency. Also another example is Speedo, where finding ways to make swimwear faster in the water is also another area of innovation interest. But the other end of the partnership spectrum is, of course, the research world. And there we've had a number of interactions over the years. And some of our key partners, for example, are Deakin University here in Australia, as well as the University of Applied Science in Northwest Switzerland, who we've also worked with over a number of years.
Okay, so you have fixed partners. What about new partners? What about brands who would like to have an innovation or to kind of innovate a product and make it better? What do you recommend they do to bring this about?
We're always open to working with both new brands and new partners, and also with new academic and research partners as well. So whenever we think about innovations, it's always thinking about fresh horizons and how you can achieve new effects and new impacts. So we're very open to new collaborations across the board. I guess in terms of thinking about ways to identify or think about innovating from a brand perspective, in the end, a lot of innovation really comes down to how do people interact with a new idea, and is it useful to a consumer in the end? And so the starting point for identifying ideas oftentimes is about, is there an unmet consumer need? And is there a way to achieve or meet that need with a new idea and a new approach? And so that market inspiration is really key in terms of actually bringing an idea through to market impact. And one of the things about thinking through where those needs are is that having conversations with HeiQ, for example, and HeiQ in turn also with research in our research network, we can help to try and find connections between new ideas that might meet those needs and new materials and emerging science, and find different approaches to try and innovate and achieve those targets.
Okay, so that sounds really interesting. Can you actually, say specifically maybe current projects you are running? Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, we've got a number of areas where we have a number of different projects and activities. So some of the key areas that we're really active in include durable water repellency effects, where we have a number of different efforts in that area. And another key area for us is thermal comfort. So, for example, cooling technologies, and we're constantly working on new approaches in that area. Also, odor control and freshness effects is a key area for us to innovate in. So there's sort of key themes that we have a number of different activities in, but there's also an overarching emphasis on looking at natural materials and bio-derived materials as a key part of how we look at bringing new materials into our product ranges. That's an overarching theme, if you like, of interest for our innovation.
Okay, is there any among these innovations that you mentioned that are your personal favorite? And why? You can tell us that.
I think very excited about a lot of the innovations that we've been able to bring to market over the years, and very proud of the team at HeiQ for being able to work together, because innovation really is a company-wide spirit that needs to be lived to bring through a lot of these innovations. And if I think back over the years, though, there's one particular product which I'm quite fond of, and that's HeiQ Smart Temp, which was an innovation that was really focused on a question about how can we make cooling adaptive to what the body really needs at any given point in time. How can you be cooler when you're really hot and exercising hard, and then when you're in a cooler climate, you don't really need that cooling effect? And so that question really inspired us. And in that process, we thought a lot about how plants actually interact with the environment around them, and how they breathe with water vapor. And that thinking really led us to come up with a thermoregulating polymer that we invented as part of that product. And so it was quite an exciting as well as inspiring approach, I think, to how to rethink cooling on textiles and to actually make them adaptable to what people actually need. So to see that come from idea through to market was extremely satisfying.
How do you test this? I mean, yeah, you say cooling and adaptive. How do you prove, how do you test this and show it in numbers that this works?
Well, that's one of the things about reaching quite far back in terms of research about the materials, is that we're constantly thinking about the underlying properties of the materials and how you can establish a benefit in terms of the physics and chemistry of what's going on. So there's testing at a laboratory level to show that the principles are there, but there's also translation into actual exercise and field testing. And how do you build structures around taking information from athletes or from exercise studies and showing that there's a benefit actually in real use? And that's something where have a number of tools where we can do that from laboratory all the way through to field application, not only for Smart Temp, but also a number of our other technologies as well.
Right. So for all this, yeah, you really have to have access to all kinds of really good testing facilities, I guess. So you work closely with several universities. Can you tell us a bit about this these cooperations?
One of the quite distinct approaches that HeiQ takes to innovation is that when we have an idea that might be a possibility to bring to market as an innovation, we really seek to actively engage with university partners and university and institute researchers, those who are really at the cutting edge of material science and knowledge, and really pushing the frontiers of science and engineering. And the reason we seek out these partnerships is that for a given idea, initially it's a risky thing, right? It may or may not work. How do you find out what's important? And so we find that when we team up with experts who have the basis of knowledge in really quite specialised fields, who also have facilities around them with very specialised equipment and infrastructure and the right tools to address those questions, we find that we can quite nimbly address, is this idea something that has merit? Is it something that we can look at in more detail? Can we work together to drive it towards a new technology? So partnering up with external research partners is really a key characteristic of how HeiQ goes about innovation. It allows us to tap knowledge and expertise wherever it might be in the world.
Okay, and then I've reached the end of my questions for you. Let us see, there is a chat function in this presentation. Let's see if any of our guests have a question. Let me see. It's like, why Australia was one of the questions. Actually, why are you in Australia? And is it especially good for innovations in textiles? What would you say?
Yeah, there's a connection to Australia. That's where I'm from originally, but my path goes through the US with grad school and then Switzerland with research, and then of course being part of starting HeiQ. But the journey back to Australia in part is family related and being back with family, but it's also an opportunity, I think, to approach research and the very front end of innovation activity with quite strong partnerships with universities here in Australia, and Deakin University in particular. One of the unique characteristics of Deakin University here in Australia is that there's a quite strong expertise in material science and also coupled with textiles and fibres. So if we think about the bedrock of a lot of the innovation activity at HeiQ, it's also in materials and how we apply that in the context of textiles and fibres. So there's a large pool of resources that we can work with and collaborate with at this university here in Australia. And as a consequence, that's been a part of how we've built up our engagement with innovation partners externally, is how we try and replicate some of those interactions.
I see there's a question came in. How does HeiQ see the future of sustainability on textile industry? What's the impact of sustainability in the future of the textile industry?
I think from the perspective of innovation and what drives a lot of our innovation, sustainability in the sense of how do we really allow textiles to serve humanity and nature in tandem in an ongoing sense. That's really the backdrop for a lot of our framing of projects. So when we think about how we can find a path to a new idea, we're always thinking about textiles at a global level and the potential for choosing the right chemistries, the right materials, the right process choices to minimize impact, to drive materials into more sustainable sourcing of those underlying raw materials. And we're always looking to match a lot of our choices on that innovation journey, driven by what we need to do for sustainability.
So would you say sustainability is a driver for innovation at HeiQ?
Absolutely. And I think it's always a feature of how we frame projects and also how we think about how we engage with our industry and also our customers and partners. It's a constant factor.
Okay, thank you. I see there are no more questions, so we can actually finish our presentation here. Thank you very much for joining. People will be able to rewatch this interview actually later on. Next week, we will upload all videos, all these presentations as videos on our website, and you can watch them there. Okay, Murray, thank you for joining.
Thanks for your help. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.